Welcome to another episode of Money, Meaning, and Mastery with your host, Wilson Raposo. I have been away for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and I've been worried that I might lose the support that I have so far in this podcast. The little followers that I have, the people that listen to the podcast, the videos I posted, and follow me on social media, I've been worried that I might lose that support. And in part is because I haven't been releasing episodes for this podcast as I promised every Tuesday, or at least on a weekly basis. That hasn't happened since I started, and I take full responsibility for that. I'd been through a few changes, a few things in my life. In part is work travel. I went to Dominican Republic to visit my father, spend some time with family over there, as well as all the things that I do have things to share about, and hopefully this is something that you guys can learn from. So I started this creative outlet again with my podcast and posted on social media very early this year, 2026. I would say last week of December, if I remember correctly. But the podcast, I think I launched it at the beginning of this year. And when I started this podcast, I started posting daily TikToks and Instagram reels on my accounts. And what I hope with that is that they work as a synergy. I would release a podcast, I can create clips out of that podcast and then post on Instagram reels. I did notice that those kind of videos did not get as much traction as I wanted to. So I started making individual reels in TikToks every single day. So when I did both of those things, posting every single day on these short form content accounts and creating a podcast on a weekly basis, I realized that I was one, burning out, two, did not have the time to do both correctly. And as I had all the responsibilities, I still have a full time job that I still love, that I love and I still do on a daily basis or at least weekdays. And on top of that, this creative outlet that does take time to prepare, to write down your ideas, to do research, to record, to edit, and eventually release for you guys to listen to or watch. I realized I couldn't do both. So I had to drop one of them. And for me, that was the podcast that I had to pause for at least for a moment so I can put my full focus on the short form content. Why did I decide to do that? Because I realized that I needed to still be consistent. I have not created content for a couple of years since then, and I was still struggling to being consistent. Doing a video every single day helped me get more consistent. And I finally got to a point where I can post a video every single day and not overthink it, just come up with an idea, record something, and put it out there. I started to be more forgiving for myself for not being fully prepared in these videos. But when it comes to the podcast, I wanted to be prepared. I wanted to create something that will provide value for you guys and whoever is listening or watching on YouTube. And in doing so, I went through a few journeys. Number one, I started thinking and brainstorming about what I wanted for this podcast. In part, I'm doing this podcast because I wanted to share as I figure life on my own and hopefully share lessons learned and hopefully help all the people in achieving change through those lessons in their lives, in their careers, and how they navigate everything that comes up as an adult, right? But in doing so, I also knew that I wanted to get better at communication. I wanted to be more comfortable in front of a camera, share my ideas more publicly, not over prepare, not sound so robotic, and show more of my personality. So in doing so, as I was brainstorming how I could achieve that, I started watching all the creators, watching all the podcasts and see their formats. And I felt that I spent too much time studying these formats, these podcasts, which led me to analysis paralysis, which is something that I still suffer from in many aspects of my life, in my career, my creative outlets, anything. I tend to overthink things and try to over prepare and do over research. And what that leads to is to lack of action. That's why I didn't release a podcast episode for a couple of weeks or couple of months. And I take full responsibility for that. And the other part is that I wanted to provide value, which Value is very subjective, and I can try to squeeze a lesson out of anything that I go through and share and put an episode about, right after that. But the analysis paralysis overcame that purpose, the purpose of providing value. I also wanted to create podcasts more in a freestyle form, not doing cuts, not retakes, as I'm doing it right now. I'm trying to record this podcast episode without doing cuts, without doing retakes, and in part to help my communication and two to show more of my personality. And that sounds so robotic. All right. So that's the explanation. I hope to stick around this time much longer or more consistently. I think the short form part of my social media strategy is already taken care of. I'm being very consistent with that. So now it's time to put effort and go all in on this podcast. For today, I wanted to talk about something that blew up a couple of weeks ago. And that was about the Starbucks CEO, Brian Niccol. He was in a Wall Street Journal podcast, and he was asked about how Starbucks drinks are now up to $9. If you go to a Starbucks and order a drink, pretty much any drink would at least be $6.50. I live in California, and that's the prices that I see. When I go to New York City, I also see the same prices. So the average, I would say, is 6.5 or 7, at least from what I've seen. If you order a venti size, let's say you add an extra shot of espresso. If you add oat milk, I'm lactose intolerant, so I can't really do regular milk. So I believe there's a surcharge for that. If you want to add any kind of syrup, if you want to add a different kind of espresso, any change that you do to the default Starbucks drink is going to cost you a little bit more. And I have definitely paid over $9 for a Starbucks drink. So when I heard that, I was like, wow, this is finally getting attention. I have paid that price for the longest. And granted, I don't go to Starbucks every day. I every time I go on a work trip, I go on a site visit trip, I go to San Francisco very often, or I go to New York City. Anytime that I'm away from home, I usually get a Starbucks drink or I make my trip around that Starbucks trip so I can get a Starbucks drink because I don't get to have it every single day. I do enjoy my coffee at home. I drink Nespresso. The Nespresso coffee pots are amazing. I have my whole setup at home. I'm a coffee lover, so I enjoy having coffee at home. But when I'm outside in the street and I'm doing a work trip, I make sure I do stop at Starbucks and get my Starbucks drink and get my bacon and gouda sandwich, which is, by the way, the best sandwich ever. We can argue about that. I have strong points. But the Starbucks drink being $9, as he said that, he was asked why the Starbucks drink go up to $9. And he shared that a $9 Starbucks drink is a premium, affordable experience that you can have, right? When he said that out loud, the internet, of course, had backlash. There was a lot of posts and content around that and sharing about how Starbucks has lost the plot, how the Starbucks CEO, which I believe was also the Chipotle CEO, has lost his plot. He's out of touch. And that makes sense. If you think about it, it's just coffee. Coffee with sugar. Coffee with milk. Why should it be $9 when coffee beans, I think a whole pound of coffee beans would probably run to $15, and that gets you, tens of lattes, right? So when people started listening to what he had to say about and the explanation about being affordable experience, people rightfully so had outrage. Now, I used to work at Starbucks. I worked at Starbucks in college when I was at Cornell University, my sophomore year, my junior year, and I was working 32 hours a week. So I knew Starbucks in and out. And back then, Starbucks was pretty fun. I enjoyed Starbucks a lot as a customer. I enjoyed coming into Starbucks and studying pretty much all day. I would come in the morning with my friend, study, take online classes if they had online classes at a time, do reading for my textbooks, come and do homework, pretty much I will make my whole day about Starbucks because it was a cozy, comfortable place to come. And in part back then, we're talking about 2014, 2015. Starbucks had still had this theme of, being that third place where you feel comfortable and cozy. And that third place is obviously after your first place, which is your home, your second place, which is work. Starbucks what's your third place where you can come here and feel like you belonged, right? So for me, I enjoyed that aspect of Starbucks and coming, getting a drink, knowing my baristas, and coming and doing work in there. Because Starbucks back then catered to that. And as I worked at Starbucks, I also was part of that system and I was trained to provide that kind of environment for our customers. When I graduated college in 2017, I didn't have a job for 5 to 6 months. So the first thing I did as I was applying to jobs is like, hey, I need to pay my bills. So the first thing I did is go get a job at Starbucks. Again, it's the thing that I knew. I'd enjoyed it. And in fact, my English got much better while working at Starbucks because I was exposed to speaking every single day and listening to different accents and cultures. And as people order their drinks, my English got better as I communicated with them. So I love Starbucks. I still love Starbucks. So I worked at Starbucks after college graduation, and it was a fun time until I got my full time job and I ended up quitting. So I haven't been really too involved with Starbucks lately, except for the times that I do go on a work trip and I have my drink. Right now, why did I share that context? I have the credentials to talk about this. And as I go to Starbucks these days, Starbucks is not the same it used to be. It's not. It does not provide that affordable first part is not affordable, and it does not provide that cozy third home place that they cater to, that they describe initially at the beginnings. If you go to Starbucks these days, it's pretty much optimized to be a place that you come in and out. There's barely any tables. There's chairs. There is no outlets. The bathrooms are rarely opened. The whole place has been optimized for drive-through orders or mobile orders. Rightfully so, the pandemic led to these changes. In the pandemic, we couldn't have touch or hand touch or any type of contact. So Starbucks needed to still make money. So what did they do? They optimized for an efficient type of delivery of their coffees, their pastries, and their sandwiches. So most of the Starbucks these days either have closed down or they're completely optimized for mobile or drive-through orders. So when Brian Niccol was asked about this $9 experience, he mentions that what they are providing or that they're hoping to provide is an environment where the customer can come in and have a premium affordable latte where they can have a connection with the baristas and enjoy their time at Starbucks. And my first thought there is that, hey, that's no longer the case. You no longer provide this. Starbucks does not offer this cozy or comfortable experience that Brian Nichols was describing. And definitely baristas do not care, at least from my experience, do not care to develop that kind of relationship with their customers where they know their names, they ask about how their day is going. It's very optimized for fast service. It's not a cafe, it's not a lounge. It's not like your local coffee shop that you can come in and it takes you 5 minutes to order, but it's because you have a quick conversation, you have small talk with your barista or the person that is ringing you at the cashier. It's not like that. And maybe they're losing business to these kind of cafes and local shops, but Starbucks these days does not provide this kind of experience. Why am I saying this? Because this is part of something that behavioral economists and marketers have been studying for decades, and it is this thought of the experience economy. The experience economy is very prevalent in many of the brands that we consume and are part of. If you think about Apple, you can go to the Apple store. Apple doesn't sell smartphones. Apple sells experience of owning an iPhone and being part of the Apple family. If you walk into an Apple store, the first thing you see is this well thought out, very detail oriented store where everything is well put in place, right amount of lighting, right amount of ambient temperature, right amount of space between equipment to allow you to come in and enjoy each of the devices that they have. If you think about Delta, I'm a Delta guy. I fly Delta for pretty much all my personal travel. I'm a platinum medallion for this year, the past couple of years, because all the travel that I do. For work, I do also use Delta, also use United, JetBlue, pretty much any other airline for work. For personal, since I've been traveling a lot for personal, I choose my default airline is Delta. Delta, in like any other airline, they're not in the business of getting you from A to B. They're not in the business of getting you from LAX to JFK, which is my typical route. It's an experience of flying Delta. It's the Delta Sky Club lounge experience that you get to enjoy as you're going through the airport. Is the free upgrades that you get as being part of a medallion if you have status with Delta. And in fact, there is a Delta superiority complex when it comes to other airlines as well. People who fly Delta, they feel like they're better than other people. I'm guilty of that, unfortunately. Jokes aside, I enjoy flying Delta. And it makes me feel like it's part of experience because if I care only about getting from A to B, I will fly the cheapest airline, but I do pay the premium sometimes out of pocket to fly Delta because I enjoy being part of enjoying that experience that Delta provides. And that goes from the moment you're bored, the moment you get off, the ticketing service, the customer service online or via text message, all of that Delta experience I enjoy. So all these companies at some point stop caring about selling a product. Starbucks doesn't sell coffee, or at least they try to not to sell coffee. They sell the experience of a coffee, a sip of coffee that you get to enjoy between home and work as you're commuting to work. Apple doesn't sell a phone that you can call and text. It sells a piece of hardware that rarely has any issues, that is optimized with a very well put software, right? And Delta, as I said, sells the whole experience. So these companies no longer care about selling a product. They are in the business of selling the experience. And that's what we as customers pay for. Now, what it got me thinking about this is that how this experience economy is so prevalent, so present in our day to day lives, and how we usually pay up for a premium, we usually pay up more to have these kind of experiences. And when these companies are sharing about or making ads or doing these the events that Apple do every single year, um, they don't mention that it's an experience that they're selling. And if they do so, or if they market it that way, they never talk about the big numbers, about how much it costs to have that experience. Usually, these experiences do cost more money. You're paying a premium for them. Hence, like Starbucks example, you're paying more for your cup of coffee these days. Delta, I pay a premium every time I fly. I pay more. But Delta tickets are usually more expensive. iPhones, they're more expensive than any other Android device. So this experience does cost money, and we pay the price. But the thing is that, like, I'm thinking about this is that companies they don't focus and selling functionality of a product, right? They care about selling this experience, and the way that they advertise this experience is that they try to describe the price of having that experience in the most or the smallest unit price possible. If you think about Starbucks, when Brian Niccol was during this interview, he said that is only $9 that you get to pay to have an affordable premium experience. If you think about it on a day to day basis, I go on work trips, and every time I go on a work trip, which is not that often, I would say probably 2 to 4 times a month. If I'm on the road and I have a $9 premium affordable experience, I may not think about the price because it's just $9. It's under $10. To me, that sounds cheap. If I'm going on a work trip and I get to have a pumpkin spice latte with oat milk, and extra hot, and extra shot of espresso, and I pay $9 for it, since it's only 4 times a month, doesn't sound like a lot of money to me. I'd spend way much more money on anything else. So on a unit basis, a $9 coffee doesn't sound so expensive, right? Now, that got me thinking about this is that I'm a very non typical Starbucks customer. I don't go to Starbucks often enough for a Starbucks expense to be something that I should look into when it comes to my budget. If you think about the average commuter, let's say someone who drives an hour in their truck, in their car, so let's say a typical commute from Orange County to Los Angeles. If you're driving every day, you're probably rushing every morning to try to beat the morning commute. And the first thing you do is like as soon as you're out of the door, you find your local Starbucks. You go through the drive-through, you get a sandwich, you get a coffee. That's like let's say $15. Very typical amount for a normal Starbucks breakfast, coffee and a sandwich. When you get that $15 coffee and sandwich, you don't think about the price. It's just $15. You do this every day. And psychologically, we think about it just on a single day basis, on a single unit price, because that's how we're hearing about when we're paying for the coffee in the drive through. $15 is not a lot of money for a single day. But for an average commuter that goes to work, let's say 5 days a week, that does that same commute every single day, 5 days a week, and there's 52 weeks, let's call it 50 weeks a year, excluding 2 weeks of vacation or PTO. That's 50 weeks times 5 days. That's 250 days that potentially this average commuter will go through the Starbucks drive through. And you multiply that by $15. That means that this average commuter is spending $3,750 a year in their Starbucks breakfast, right? I obviously that may not be accurate, but I'm just setting an example here. $3,750 a year in Starbucks. So when you ask this average commuter, would you spend $15 in Starbucks coffee with a sandwich? The average person would say yes. I would spend $15. It's nothing. But if you ask this person, will you spend $3,750 a year in Starbucks coffee and sandwich? You might think back about this because what do you mean $3,750? We're talking about a lot of money in coffee and a sandwich, right? That's somebody's rent. That's my rent for a month, right? So you're saying that the average commuter will spend $3,750 in Starbucks, where if they skip that, they basically get to cover a month's rent. We don't think about purchases this way. We always think and rationalize purchases at a unit price, that $15 that that person spends per day. And that's what these companies do when they're explaining the price of these experiences. They don't say, hey, you can have an affordable premium coffee experience at Starbucks for $3,750 a year. They say you get to have an affordable premium experience under $10 because that's what we think of when we go in and pay for a single day. We don't think about the cost of that purchase long term. We think about it just what it means for us as we are at Starbucks for a single day and buy that coffee, right? So, what that got me thinking about is that how many of these purchases do we do every single day that we don't think about the long term cost of that purchase? For me, I would say the most common thing that I do is buying Amazon. I do buy Amazon a lot. I do. Um, I wouldn't say it's a shopping problem. Like I don't shop enough, but Every time I buy something on Amazon, it's always $20, $15, $25. And most of those purchases are books. I buy a lot of books. I buy a lot of books for my Amazon Kindle. I buy physical books as well. There's sometimes I like reading on paper. I don't think about how much money I shop on Amazon. I have never done the math. I bet you that Amazon does not provide you the number straight up. You cannot go to your Amazon account and you'll see that you spend X amount of money this year so far at Amazon. They are not in the business of telling you this information because the moment that you have this information, they know that you can be rational enough to make a decision and cut that spending because it is too much money. And we do this for so many other things in our lives that we don't pay attention to. So now, knowing this, that we don't think about long-term costs of things, and unless you don't have a system in place, let's say a expense tracker, I use particular Rocket Money, where you can see and categorize your purchases and set a budget. Sure, you can have a budget, let's say for personal things, $100 a month or something like that. But if you don't have a category specifically for the thing that you're spending that personal budget on, you wouldn't know how much money you're giving to a specific business. To detect whether you have a problem, a purchasing problem, or if you're spending too much money on something that may not be necessary and it's just a want, not a need, right? So, what I'm getting at with this is that we don't do due diligence and thinking about the long term costs of the things that we buy on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. And something I started to implement lately is to be more mindful of that. I don't necessarily track a lot of the spending I do at a personal level because, again, I rationalize every single purchase with, oh, it's just $10, it's just $20. And what I'm going through right now is to start paying more attention to these purchases, to start paying attention to the times that I pay a premium just to have an experience, where in reality, I may not really need it. That experience over time does not matter. At the end of the day, if you go to Starbucks 250 times a year, going to Starbucks might be overrated for you. You just care about getting that coffee and getting the sandwich. And the moment you start thinking about the long term costs and the fact that you no longer care about this experience that most companies are offering these days because they're now selling a product, maybe that would be a wake up call for you and me to make changes in our lives that align more with our long term goals. Maybe your long term goal is to travel more. Maybe your long term goal is to save up for a down payment of a house. Maybe your long term goal is to buy a nicer car. That it makes it harder for us to achieve those goals because we're having these small purchases that we don't think about the long term consequences of. So, what I'm getting at with this episode is I want you to leave this episode. I have my dog here barking. What I want for you and me is to leave this episode being more mindful of our purchases, being more mindful of the times that we rationalize small purchases and think about the long term consequences of these purchases. In particular, when it comes to subscriptions, that's a very common example here. Where Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, if you have any of these subscriptions, are very common in a normal household. It's just $20 a month, maybe it's just $40 a month. Over a year, that might be $480. That might be 1,000, depending on whatever number of subscriptions you have. Whatever you spend on a weekly basis or on a occurrence basis. So, monthly, weekly, whatever that is. Do the long-term math and see what it means that for your budget. See what it means when it comes to your expenses, because money is a very valuable tool and it gives us a lot of things that makes us happy, that makes us comfortable, right? And I love money. I love making money. I love spending money. But sometimes the way that we spend our money does not reflect what we really want. And we should be mindful of that. We should be mindful of the ways that we're using our money, perhaps throwing our money away, depending on who you ask, and be more mindful of these purchases so that we can make decisions and make changes that will align with our long term goals. Think about this experience economy. Think about the products and services the companies that offer products and services that you enjoy on a daily basis, and see which of these companies are marketing or selling you an experience and not a product. Maybe you don't need the experience. Maybe you just need the product. That is it for this episode. Thank you for listening to me. I am very proud of myself today because I made a whole episode without cuts, I'm not going to do being cuts or edits. I'm just going to release this whole video like this. And I'm challenging myself to be more comfortable with the way I speak, the way that I use my ums and so's and ends, my filler words, because that will help me become a better communicator, a better speaker. And that's what I want for this at a personal level with this podcast, to help me get there. I will be releasing more podcast episodes in this format. If you have any feedback for me, feel free to share in the comments or shoot me an email or reach out to me on any of my socials. I have Instagram, TikTok. It's at yes.wilson. You can follow me on YouTube as well. I do have the YouTube channel where I release this podcast. I also release it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Whatever you listen to your podcast, you can leave me any feedback. Tell me what you liked about this episode. Tell me what topics you'd like me to talk about next. Feel free to do so. And if you know somebody that might benefit from listening to this podcast, feel free to share it with them. Share what you like about it. And hopefully I gained some more new friends. That is it for this episode. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful week. See you on the next one.